Cool. Welcome everyone. This is Moses Sampal, part of the Mad About Growth team. And we have Ashish today with us. Before we get into the bio of Ashish, I quickly want to talk about what Mad About Growth is. Mad About Growth essentially is a phygital community of growth professionals. So how we define growth is essentially a function of sales, marketing, and strategy. So what we are trying to achieve as a community is to become lifelong learners of the growth skills, right? So how do we achieve that? We do podcast sessions like this where we bring in people with experience amongst these three skills that we're talking about, or we bring in academics and research people who are doing cutting edge research on these domains, right? So that's one way of learning. You can call it theoretical learning because like I'm not literally doing something to grow a brand, right? So that's the next part, which is learning through practice. Now that happens again at two levels. So if you're a person new to growth related field, then you essentially start off as an apprentice where you get projects and but you're not getting paid. It's more like you practicing, right? Whatever you're learning. And on the other side, once you reach a certain stage, you start getting paid gigs through the community itself, right? So that's essentially how we are learning the growth skills that's required for a person to thrive in the growth world. So that's about the community. Do you have any questions, Ashish?
No, we are good. We're good.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm going to quickly introduce Ashish. So today is the second week of September. So typically we do first week around marketing, second week around sales, and third week around strategy. And the fourth week is still a surprise. We'll let you guys know in a bit. Okay, coming back to Ashish. Ashish, thanks a lot for doing this first. I'm going to quickly read your profile, then we'll delve into sales related strategies, right? Ashish is a seasoned solution sales professional with over 13 years of sales experience in the field of media, industrial robotics, automation solution, and enterprise software sales. He has been part of multiple startups such as AppDynamics, acquired by Cisco for 3.2 billion, and Nutanix, valued at 5 billion in global sales roles, where he was responsible to drive strategy to acquire G2K customers across all verticals. He has a proven track record of designing go-to-market solutions and strategies for global system integrators and their enterprise customers across the globe. Ashish is passionate about solving customer problems and is perceived as a trusted advisor amongst partners and customers. All right, that's a very succinct and nice intro. Ashish, so we'll start with the one thing that really caught my eye was solving customer problems. We'll come to that. But before that, I really want to understand, when did you get into sales? Because sales essentially, at least from where I come from, southern part of Tamil Nadu, you are essentially an engineer or a doctor. Worst case scenario, I don't know, probably you become an architect, right? But sales as a role has never been talked about, right? Even in business schools, like there's no separate sales per se as a course, right? It's put under marketing, or nowadays they are putting it under growth and whatnot, right? So how did you get into that? And do you remember a time where you're like, oh man, like that's something that I want to do, or it just like naturally happened?
No, see, everybody is selling in some way or form, right? It doesn't matter if if you're an architect, if you're an engineer, if you are in commerce field, it doesn't matter, right? We are selling ourselves at some level, right? Be it our product or be it ourselves from our technical capabilities perspective or some of the skills that we have. So for me, the sales journey started when I was an engineer, right? I had a couple of gigs with some media companies and I did it as a part-time gig where I was selling some of their services and acquiring some customers for them. And that's when I kind of realized that it's something I like doing, right? There is an interest and inclination towards this field, but again, that was not something that I had made my mind up. Right? I was always waiting for what the right opportunity could have been for me. Right? So coincidentally, what happened was immediately after college, I got placed in Atlas Copco, which was an industrial robotics and automation uh, company, and we used to sell tools and robotics to some of the largest automobile manufacturers in the world. and I got into a sales profile there, right? And since then, I think I've just loved this job. I mean, there's something about sales that keeps me kicking, keeps me going, and it's always making me look forward to what the next challenge could be. So since then, I moved into App Dynamics, where I was responsible for domestic sales initially, and then I was responsible to handle some of the global system integrators such as your TCS, HCL, Cognizant, and so on and so forth. And that is where the whole concept of go-to-market strategies, the whole concept of MEDIC, business value or proposition or value-based selling started, right? And then moved into Nutanix with a very similar profile, right? And right now, I am with Aqua Security. I'm heading the GSI sales for them, and mostly for the Indian GSIs, the top four: HCL, TCS, Cognizant, and Wipro. So that is where I am.
Very nice. So also when I was going through your LinkedIn profile, this is something that I do as a hack to hire salespeople in the previous stint that I was in. When I see a profile, if a person hasn't stuck around with a company for more than a year, especially a salesperson or a marketing person, right? Which means that this person really didn't achieve the targets. And that's one of the reasons why they moved on to the next company, or they were asked to move on to the next company, right? Whereas with you, I see that every company that you have been with, it's always been more than 2 years, right? Which means like you have always achieved your targets, right? So that in turn like puts you in this league of people that I would be like, okay, this is a person that I want to get to know, one, and if I'm in a position to hire that person, I'm going to hire that person, right? So when you say something about me ticks, right? So have you ever thought about that? Like, what is it about? So two things here, right? One about the field itself that you like sales. That is one thing. The other thing is something about you that people trust or people buy from you. At the end of the day, it's people buy from a person, right?
True,
Yeah.
absolutely. So see, that way if you look into it, sales has many facets to it, right? And different facets of sales appeals to different sales people, right? For some people, it's the money that's driving them. For some people, it's growth. For some people, it is just the challenge that every customer presents to them, or every time they move on to a new company, right? The whole landscape changes, the paradigm shifts, right? For example, when I was at Atlas Copco, I was into selling industrial robotics and automation. The way that sale was done is very different from how enterprises or IT enterprises buy from their vendors, right? And that change in itself is phenomenal in the sense I can't even begin to explain the difference or the upskilling that I had to do once I got out of Atlas Copco and start adopting to App Dynamics sales culture, right? And then when I moved into Nutanix, there was a whole new ball game altogether, right? So then you again have to acquire some new skills. You have to unlearn some of the old things that's done. Then you have to, as you grow, what you also need to do is you need to keep yourself updated. You need to understand how can you have those conversations that you weren't having before. When you're starting off your career, you mostly interact with junior folks, right?
Right.
The skill set you need for that is different. Then after a few years of experience, the kind of people you start interacting with are slightly more senior, right? And the same conversations that work with the junior folk will not work with a mid management level guy, right? And as you scale in your career path, you also start interacting with people at a more executive layer. Right? And their objectives, their agendas, their priorities are very different from guys in the bottom of the food chain, right? So to be able to understand what is relevant for each of those people at each of those layers, I think is a transformational journey in itself. Right? Because you evolve in the whole process of learning, right? You understand things that you are not aware of before, right? Because when I was a junior guy, I didn't know what my boss's priority was. All I cared about was, hey, is my salary being credited to my account every month or not, right? But as you grow, as the responsibilities on you grow, the way you prioritize your different aspects of professional life, whereas personal life, everything changes, right? And then you start building on that. So yeah, I think one of the key factors that's keeping me going is the learning in the process of growing.
Okay.
Right? I think that's been critical.
Very nice. So when you moved from this Atlas Corp to App Dynamics first, of course, like you must have been asked this question of, hey, you are selling something that's, touchable, feelable, and then suddenly you're coming into something that's very abstract, right? Like you can't feel it, you can't touch it.
True.
So how did you tackle that question? Or like what made you go there in the first place, from hardware to software, enterprise sales?
No, so I think the person who was hiring me at that point in time,
Sorry?
the person who was hiring me at that point in time at App Dynamics, he was betting on my skill set.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It was not about what I knew, what I didn't.
Right.
What he was looking at when he was hiring me is one, that I was coachable.
Right.
Right. Second, if I had the right attitude.
Okay.
With respect to being able to learn, being able to adopt to a new culture, moving from one domain to another, and being in a position to understand things quickly and move forward. Right? So to some extent, how intelligent I was according to him, how smart I was according to him, and how adaptable I was according to him mattered to him. Right? I think he took a blind faith, saying that, you know what, let's test this guy out. Let's see if it works.
Right.
And yeah, I think fortunately it worked out in all of our favors. But yeah, I think he took a blind bet, because usually it's a very tough thing to do. People might say that, hey, it's sales.
Yeah.
Yes, it is sales, but it's very different.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't survive the transition.
Correct. And a lot of people on the other side don't take that chance also.
Yeah, they wouldn't take it because the fear to failure is very high. The risk appetite as you grow reduces.
Right.
There are very few people who will be enthusiastic to drop everything that they have built over the last 10 years or 15 years and get into something absolutely brand new for them. Right? You have to have a lot of courage to do something like that. Right? And I think that is something that even when we grow and as the responsibilities that we have keep growing, we will think at least a couple of times or maybe more to figure out if we could actually take that leap of faith. Right? But at a more, at least for me, at the age that I was, it was a challenge. Right? Hey, I'm doing something, I'm being successful at this. Let's see if I can do the other thing as well. Right? Let's see if it works.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, you'll always figure something out for yourself. Right? But the idea was that are you up to the challenge that was presented to you? So I think that's what kicked me. Saying, let's see how it goes. And I didn't have a lot of responsibility at that point in time, so that worked in my favor, right? To take that risk.
Right. So that's what you mean by coachable, right?
Correct. So that is one part of it, right?
Right.
The risk appetite is something personal, but coachability is, I think it's an attitude thing.
Right.
Right. A lot of people who are especially successful, they have a mindset that they know it all.
Yes.
People who have
question, yeah.
And people who have tasted success very early in their lives, they're more rigid about it. There is a sense of arrogance that it would not be something that would be on your face,
right?
But subconsciously, right? You build that thing. Hey, you know what? I've done this. I've been there. I've done that. I am at my prime, and nobody can take me down. And it gets into a lot of people. So I think if you have the maturity to navigate through those phases of your life and do it well, not just navigate, right? You have to do it well in the right way, with the right spirit. I think then the probability of success increases.
Right.
So yeah. So coachability for me is an attitude, right?
Correct.
If you are open to ideas, if you're open to views, if you're open to feedback, and if you have the ability to see, there are some people who will criticize you for the heck of it, right? But there would be some people who are criticizing you for your own benefit,
right?
So that you grow, you learn from what somebody else is telling you. So if you're able to do that, I think that makes a huge difference to your career path as well, because it shows in the way you behave, in the way you interact with people, in the way you are approachable in means, right? So I think all those things matter.
Right. At what point you started getting into, let's say, the frameworks and mental models behind it?
Yeah.
Did that happen early in your career, or like as you grew, and was it something like someone gave a book and you learned that, or a mentor teaching you that, or you came out with your own thing?
No, so when I moved from Atlas Copco to AppDynamics, I think that is when I got exposed to these sales methodologies,
Right,
right?
right.
Value selling, value selling framework, and uh, MEDIC.
Mhm.
And I think in sales, one of the most critical thing is for you to have a good mentor,
Right.
especially if you're not very experienced,
Mm.
because you're bound to make mistakes,
Mm.
right? Now, what a mentor does is that he passes his experience to you, right? So when you hit a scenario where that your mentor has already gone through, right? You know how to tackle that situation.
Mm.
But if you don't have a mentor who's consistently coaching you, at least in your initial phases of your sales career, and if the mentor is not good enough or strong enough with his basic foundation and principles of sales, I think you will struggle.
Mm.
I'm not saying you can't be successful. It'll just be a slightly more harder, right?
And more
Because
time.
you have to learn from your own experience, which
Correct.
means that you will commit those mistakes and you
Right.
will learn from there.
Mm.
So fortunately for me, when I got into AppDynamics, I had a set of very good mentors,
Okay.
and they've guided me through the entire path, right? With respect to understanding how customers behave, how the psyche of customer is, what is the kind of psyche you need to cope with your customers' mindset or the situations or circumstances that they present to you, right? I
Mm.
think the mentors I had were phenomenal, and I still feel indebted to them. Very good relationships with them even today.
Can you think of like at least one or two instances where you've felt like I've found the right mentor?
Yeah, I mean there are hundreds of it.
Okay.
Right?
Now,
Yeah. So
specific instance. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about instance.
yeah, yeah, I'm talking about instance.
Right, right,
What
right.
happens is sales is not an easy job to begin with, right?
Mm.
You are going to have your ups, you're going to have your downs. There are people who are going to catch you by a collar and interrogate your sorts,
Right,
right? Based on
right.
what you've done right or wrong,
Mm.
right? And at that point in time, you'd always look for a feedback, right? You'd always look for somebody who can tell you, hey, what are you doing right? What are
Mm.
you doing wrong? Or
Mm.
what are the things that you need to change, right? To be in a position to adopt to the current situation,
Mm.
right? So and that I think that is a part of the experience, right? Experience is not about how many years you've been in the industry, right? Experience is about how much have you learned in the given frame of time that you've worked in that industry,
Mm.
and how deep and vast is your experience? How many unique situations or circumstances have you already hit,
Right.
right? That you have overcome over a period of time, right? Some people take 20 years and they still don't get there. They've not come across the wrath of being in sales,
Mm.
right? But there are some people who, at a very early stage of the career itself, are exposed to so many circumstances, scenarios, tough situations that they have to deal with, and they have to muscle their way out,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And I think that at that point in time, if you have a good mentor, especially like I said in the initial stages of your sales career, that they're just pouring out their 20 years of experience to you in a platter,
Mm.
and that is so helpful, especially
Right.
when you rock bottom and you think that, hey, you know what, I don't think if I have it in me to move any further,
Mm.
or you start questioning your skills, your capability, your ability as a sales guy,
Mm.
these guys can make a difference because they've when they were hiring you, they saw something in you to
Right.
begin with, right?
Mm.
Otherwise you wouldn't be hired,
Mm.
right? And if they're seeing something in you, they also know how to extract the potential out of it,
Right.
and they'll help you, they'll ease the way out for you. And at least in my career, I've come across quite a few phases of that, and fortunately at each of those phases I've had a couple of good mentors whom I reach out to, and they've always helped me navigate the way out.
And what kind of questions do you reach out to them with? Like, is it something like, hey, one of the things that we keep talking about at Giridharana is around what do you do to, with a customer who's on the fence? Like he hasn't said, um,
Hey Sam.
Yeah. Just a sec. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm saying, so this customer hasn't said no outright, okay, and hasn't signed the deal yet. So what do you do with someone like that? That now that's a very specific question, right? Like if I have a mentor, how I can put that very specific question. Like, do you go to your mentors with those kind of specific questions, or it's like a broad base? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
It's not just with those questions, right? In your professional life, not everything is revolving around your customer.
right.
At times, you have company politics that plays in.
Uh,
Right? There are other dynamics within an organization that start impacting you in ways and means that you don't know, but you would want to figure out, hey, what would be the implication of this particular event, right? Or let's say with a customer itself, like you rightly mentioned, you're going through a patch, you spent 6 months with a customer, right? You have checked all the boxes from a sales process perspective. That, hey, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Ideally, by now, we should have been able to conclude on it.
Yeah.
But if it's still open, you reach out to them saying, what more can be done? Did I miss a step in the sales process or in my sales workflow that needs to be fixed?
Right.
Or can I do anything more? Can I improvise on a few things? Right? Or at least understand if this is a qualified deal. After 6 months, for all you know, I might have not qualified it well enough.
Right.
Or maybe my competition has already done it. Right? And there are a couple of steps ahead of me.
Right.
In cases like that, how do I counter these sort of situations? And these are the kind of conversations that you reach out to a mentor.
Very nice. So a couple of times we talked about value-based selling and MEDDIC. So we'll get into that, right? So these are frameworks, right? So let's right now you just talked about sales process, right? So what is your sales process? Starting with, let's say, a qualified leads comes to you. I'm assuming that a qualified lead comes to you and then you take it up from there, right? And you have pre-sale. Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Okay. So what is your process when this qualified lead comes to you? Like, how do you follow this?
Yeah, so firstly, you touch base with the customer, right? You try to understand what is it they're looking for. So I think in the sales process, I think this is the most important step because this is the step that actually makes or breaks your possibility of closing a deal successfully or not, right?
Okay.
Understanding what the customer wants, why he wants what he wants, and what is it costing him today? Costing him time? Is it costing him money? Is it costing him resources? Is it delaying his plan to do something, right? If you're able to, so that is the whole MEDDIC process, right? The first step of MEDDIC is to identify the metric that can be quantified, right? That will help you understand the gravity of the situation or the issue that the customer is facing, which you need to solve, right? Only if you know that, let's say, for example, right, if a current downtime in my application is impacting 400 users and each user has, let's say if I'm an e-commerce site and each user has say $100 worth of cart, right? I'm losing quite a lot of money with downtime, right? Now, if this happens once, that's okay. But if it happens multiple times, then I need to find a solution to that problem. Right? And then immediately I need to figure out that how much am I willing to pay to fix that problem? Is it more than the problem itself, right? And sometimes any issue will have two outputs to it. One would be a tangible output, which could be measured in dollar value. The other is intangible output, right? Which could be measured in terms of an experience, a customer being impacted in a certain way, right? Your value in the system, right? Or how a customer perceives the product or the solution that you're trying to sell. Let's say Flipkart, for example. If Flipkart goes down for half an hour today, there's a very good possibility that I will uninstall Flipkart and move into Amazon and never install Flipkart ever again because Amazon will give me everything that I need. Right? Now, this when you actually look at me uninstalling Flipkart from my phone, from a tangible dollar value perspective, it might not cost much. But as an intangible value, you've lost one customer. Right? Because of a bad experience.
Correct.
right? And that could not mean anything to Flipkart today. But if there are 5 million cases like me, and then suddenly it gets Flipkart wondering, saying, hey, you know what? Maybe each time I need to fix a few things,
Mm.
right? And also the brand image itself falls so low because if I'm a very frustrated customer, I'm definitely going to put a review somewhere about my experience.
Right.
And how much is that review going to hurt? Maybe one review like of mine might not, but if there are other 500,000 reviews that speak the same language I'm speaking,
Mm.
is really going to hurt the company's image,
Right.
right? And when you look into downloading Flipkart and you see 2.5 stars versus 4 stars on Amazon, we all know where you're going to head,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So that becomes one of the factors for a company to spend that money or to create that budget to solve the problem that it's causing, right?
Mm.
Then obviously, once you are engaged with the customer, once you've understood that, hey, this is the customer's problem, this is the pain point, and this is the money that it's costing them, and from a tangible revenue perspective and intangible impacts of it could be far greater, right?
Mm.
Then you need to figure out, do they have the budget to solve this issue?
Mm.
Right? Are they aware that this is how big the issue is for them?
Right.
If they are not aware, as a sales guy, it's your responsibility to let them know, to give them perspective that, hey, you know what? You're looking only at dollar value, but maybe you should also look at the brand image. You should also look at the customers you're losing.
Right.
You should also look into the other platforms that customers are going to because of your service.
Mm.
Right? You have to give them that visibility. And this is where you create an opportunity for yourself as a good sales guy. Right? Because now you have made the customer aware of something that he might have not even thought of.
Mm.
Right? And then you need to figure out, like, hey, you know what? Fair enough. I've told them what the problem statement is. This is what it is going to cost them, right? The customer is willing to pay for it, right? Now the question is, how do I go about the decision criteria, right? Do I know what is customers' decision criteria in order to choose a solution? Maybe I've made them aware of all of these things.
Mm.
I also need to know that if they decide to buy me, they're also going to talk to 5 other competition. That's how every customer works today.
Correct.
So when they start talking to 5 customers, 5 other competitors, how are they going to land on the decision criteria, right, for the right solution?
Mm.
And that is where, again, I'm just skipping a few things about how Medic works,
Correct.
but that is where the concept of champion comes into play.
Right. Right. Mm.
Right? Because if you've done your job well, you will identify a champion within your customer base who's going to fight the battle for you internally.
So these are typically your procurement guys? Typically.
It could be anybody.
Anybody.
Right? And mostly it could be some. So as a sales process, you should be the best judge of choosing or identifying who the champion can be for you. Now, a champion could be anybody in the decision cycle, or somebody outside of it as well.
Right.
So let's say, for example, right, you want to buy a car, right? What is the first thing you do?
Buy a car, right?
Yeah.
What's the first thing that I do?
Yeah. Firstly, you figure out what your budget is, right? How much are you going to pay? You figure out what sort of a car you want as well. Do you want a sports car? Do you want a SUV? Do you want a hatchback or whatever? Right. But one of the key things that you do is that you talk to somebody who has that visibility about cars, who understands the entire automobile sector really well, and who can help you point out on what the right car would be for you.
Right.
And it could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a father, it doesn't matter. Right? It could be somebody who could help you influence, or who could influence you to pick the right car for you because he knows you.
Right.
And you trust him, most importantly. Not because that is the most important part here.
Right.
Because you respect that guy's opinion and you trust the decision that he's taking on your behalf. Right? So a champion is that person in your customer base. He could be anybody, but he should be somebody, as a good sales guy. When I say that, hey, this guy is my champion, he's somebody who can influence the economic buyer, who could influence the decision criteria and the process. I'm
Right.
saying influence. I'm not saying he can change it.
Mm.
It is going to be what it is, right?
That's the
But,
same. Yeah.
but he should be able to influence it in my favor,
Correct.
right?
Mm.
And that is the whole point of working with the champion or getting the right champion in sales, in your sales process, right?
Right.
So if you look into MEDIC as an acronym, it starts for metric, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identify pain, and the right champion,
Mm.
right? And once you have this covered, see, there's no silver bullet for success in sales, right? I'm not saying that just because you're following this, you're definitely going to close the deal. But what you're definitely doing is increasing your probability of winning the deal, right? And that is where we need to be. There are some things that are beyond your control,
Right.
right? Let's say if my competition knows the CEO of the company and he says, hey, I understand that you're buying a product, why don't you choose mine? In all likelihood, you're not going to win it. And it doesn't matter what process you follow, right? Because that, like you said, rightly said in the beginning, people buy from people, right? It's still a people job, right? It's still a thing that happens between two people more often than not.
Right.
These are just levers to ensure that you're doing the right thing in the process to get you the winning deal.
Right.
And most sales guys who know how to use MEDIC really well are more often than not successful in the sales closure. Right? More often than not, people who understand how to use MEDIC to their benefit or to their advantage, and they follow it religiously. It's not like, hey, I'm just doing it for the heck of it. I know what the metric is. I know what the economic buyer is. I know what the decision criteria is, blah, 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 right? Some people do it for the heck of it.
Right.
The company has imposed a process on you. But if you follow it meticulously and religiously, in my opinion, your probability of success is going to be a lot higher than regular.
Right.
And I think that's where MEDIC is. It's like a checklist, right? It helps you reveal what your gaps are in this process. What should you be doing better to ensure that you're able to win the deal, right? It's to assess yourself in the sales cycle per se with this particular customer, right? And if you're not able to check all the boxes here, that is when you reach out to a mentor and say, hey, you know what? This is where I'm getting stuck. What can I do? How can I be a little more creative here?
Right.
What more can I do to ensure that I get this?
Okay. So two points that you just said. One is on identifying the problem and how can I be more creative, right? And just today I was reading this blog about this guy Daniel Pink to sell is human, which you started off with. Everyone is a salesperson. That's what Daniel Pink also talks about. But this blog, it's quite a long blog, so I'm gonna quickly summarize it. Okay, now this is a research that was done about creativity, where well, let me say the end point later, but let's start with this, right? So basically, this happened in a fine arts school in Chicago. Okay, basically they took a bunch of fourth-year students for an experiment, right? And there was a studio. There were 27 objects on a table. Okay. The students were asked to select any number of objects and to arrange them as a still life, which they would then draw. Okay. And the students followed like.
Can you repeat that for me again?
So a bunch of students, art school students, were brought into a studio, and the table had 27 items. Okay. And they were asked to arrange the items into a still life form so that they can then go and draw. Okay, let's say this is my table. I'll say, okay, this glass is there, this pen is there, I'll put inside that, and then I'll start drawing. Right? That's one way to look at it. So the artists approach the task in one of the two ways. One group chose the objects that appeal to them and proceeded to draw. Okay, I'll just take my bottle and then I'll start drawing. That's one set. The other group handled more objects, rearranged them several times, and took longer on the task itself. As the researchers saw it, the first group was trying to solve a problem. The second group was trying to find a problem.
Correct.
right? The
Rightly
first group, sorry,
You rightly said. Rightly
right,
said.
right. Uh, and then now you can guess like who came out better, okay? But like it's very interesting. The first group asked themselves, how can I produce a good drawing? The second group asked themselves, what good drawing can I produce? The subtle difference, but not subtle result.
Yeah.
Okay? On the judgment day, the researcher then proceeded to determine the effect. He put the drawings on show and asked people, a panel of experts, to judge the works, right? When he tabulated the result, the problem finders won by a mile, right? However, the experiment gets even more interesting. 10 years later, the same artists were tracked down, and about half had left the art world together, and the other half are working as professional artists. The composition of the latter group, nearly all the problem finders, not the problem solvers, right? And then he goes on to explain how it has nothing to do with your technical skills, right? Like it doesn't matter you're like drawing on a fresco, painting, whatnot, right? The technical skill didn't matter. Then he waited patiently for another 8 years and discovered that the problem finders were significantly more successful than their peers.
Yeah.
Right? So he concluded it is in fact that the discovery and creation of problems, rather than any superior knowledge or technical skill or craftsmanship, that often sets the creative person apart from the others.
Absolutely. And see, it's a lot to do with the passion.
Right.
If you do anything like a task, you're always going to be mediocre at it.
Right.
You're never going to be somebody who's going to be a superstar ever. Because you're not looking at that task as something that will help you fulfill a purpose.
Yeah, like a checkbox.
Yeah, you're doing it as a checkbox.
Yeah.
Somebody asked you to do it, let's do it. Right? But the moment you start, this is something that I've realized as well. Passionate people, irrespective of the domain that you are in, the field that you are in, are always far more successful than people who are running behind materialistic gain, or let's say people who are very growth oriented, saying that, hey, I want to be the VP of sales in 5 years. Right? People who put those kind of checkpoints to the career versus people who are absolutely clear about the fun that they're having doing what they're doing. They might not have, a lot of these guys might not aspire to be VPs, but just because they're so good with what they do, people recognize that.
Right.
And they would always get that extra nudge, right, from anybody who's evaluating them versus somebody who's put a VP goal in his career path in the next 5 years. Because the approach itself is so different.
Right.
You want to achieve the same thing, but just the way you're looking at the whole problem statement or your goal changes the way you approach it.
True. Very true.
That matters in any field, irrespective of you being in art, sales, even in technical fields, right? Even in technical fields, you will find guys who are exceptionally good, where people are craving to get them into their organization, right? And not because they're very good technically, because they know that these guys are so passionate that if you tell them a problem, or if you tell them, hey, this is what I need to achieve, they'll come up with some of the most brilliant ideas that you could think of.
Yeah.
And that, I think, doing anything with passion matters. And doing, especially in sales, it's a very rewarding career, right? And if you are passionate about what you're doing, there's no limits to what you can achieve.
True. Okay, so let's go back to this one point where you talked about, what kind of questions that you go to your mentor with. And let's say you have followed this process, right? Like your MEDDIC process, entire M to C is now done. Like everything you have followed meticulously, not for the sake of doing it, right? And still it's not going anywhere, right? And then think of an instance where something like that happened and you still were able to close the deal. You followed the process, it didn't go anywhere. You reached out to a mentor, or you suddenly thought of something and then that one thing flipped it in your favor.
Yeah. So I think this is one of my first largest deals that I ever worked on, right? And what happened was very similar situation. We understood what the problem statement is. We had a very strong champion internally, but our competition had very good relationships across the board of the customer, right? So we had to influence it in a way that, I mean, at least at that point in time, I didn't know what to do, right? Because I've already hit a roadblock, right? I'm hitting my head against the wall. I'm like, dude, I don't think we can get this in, right? And a couple of, I'm intentionally not mentioning names.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So a couple of my mentors, they came up with a different approach, right? They said that, hey, you know what? We're going to lose, if this continues, we're going to lose deal anyways, right? So let's do this. Let's flip it around. Let's say that if you're not buying a solution that does the 3 or 4 key things that our solution does, you would as well not buy anything, right? Because at the end of the day, you're buying something to solve a problem. And with our champions, we were able to create that story that those 4 problems can be solved with the 3-4 capabilities that only our product has, right? And if you buy anything else, and if it's not able to solve these 4 problems, we would as well not buy anything and save that money. Right? And obviously, I didn't come up with that idea, but these guys with all the experience that they had, they said that, you know what, let's do this. If we lose, we lose anyways, right? There's nothing. There's nothing to lose here. Right? Let's look at this approach. If we win, we win it all. But if we lose, we don't lose anything anyways. Right? And that is what we did. So what we did was, we sat down with our champions, our influencers, and some of our informants, and we made a comparison sheet of us versus our competition, right? And usually what do? You say that you put the capability, you put the feature, and then you say, yes, this product does, or no, this product doesn't. And then we tweaked it a bit, because all products do more or less the same thing. But the idea is that some products can do it more easily, more effectively, and more efficiently than some other products because of the way they are architected, the way they are designed, and so on and so forth. So we spun the story that way. We didn't give a yes or a no sort of a rating. We gave a rating where product A does, let's say, scalability of product A is 97% versus scalability of product B is 27%. Right?
Both had scalability. If you had put yes and no, it would have just said yes, scalable.
Because both can scale, but how easily can it scale? Right? Up to what level can it scale matters? Right? How many users can it handle? What all data can it capture? Right? So we started rating the whole thing on a percentage basis, and then we started putting a remark around it, saying that this solution is superior than the other solution because the architecture is like this, and it is hence able to do XYZ things more effectively and efficiently than the other solution, right? And I think that also gave us a whole new perspective of how you can outgrow your competition in some of these opportunities, right? Because until then we had, I mean, at least I didn't think that way. That there's, hey, you know what? This is another way to beat in competition. And I think these things, I mean, some of these things that you get to learn from seasoned, experienced sales guys is priceless.
Right.
There is no book that can teach you this. There is no online session, or I could be exaggerating here, but you get the point. Right. That having a strong mentor can solve a lot of problems for you that you can't even see.
Okay, so now moving on to the champion thing, because like when you get into a new field, you don't know anyone, right? Like so you're essentially meeting this, let's say, this customer for the first time, and you don't know anyone within that company. So now, how do you, one, find the champion, which is relatively easier? Second, how do you start or establish a relationship with that champion, right? And make that person bad for you. Like, can you take us through that process?
So the first thing we need to understand is that everybody wants to grow in some way or form, right? Professionally, personally, doesn't matter.
Right.
The best way to build a champion is if he sees his success
is tied to you.
in what you're doing.
Right.
Right. So let me give you a scenario. Let's say that you are an IT manager in a company. You have a budget of about $5 million, right? And you have to make a decision to use to solve a particular problem with a $5 million. Now, what will you do as a IT manager? You'll get all the vendors who would give you a solution for that problem, and try to choose the best one for you. Correct? Now think about it. If another sales guy comes and says that, what does this project mean to you? $5 million is a lot of money, right? Let's say you choose the wrong solution, or maybe you choose the right solution, and you're not able to implement it to solve the problem that you're buying it for. What happens to you, and what happens to your career path? It's going to do. You're going to get fired. That's what is going to happen, right? You will not get a second chance, and even if you do, you will never be valued in the system anymore. Right? So, ideally, a good sales guy should identify what is your purpose, what is your objective, what is your short-term success criteria. How is the success or the failure of this project going to impact you? Right? And you need to show as a sales guy to that decision maker, saying that, hey, and it is something that only, it's not a process to do that, right? It's a skill. This is a very skill-based thing, right? It's not something that you can read and you can just start doing it. The way you connect with somebody and the way that person starts seeing value in engaging you is what will determine if he's going to be a champion, right? If he sees that, hey, you know what? I've called this guy up at 11 in the night and he's answered my call, and I've asked him for 10 documents to be given before 1 a.m. in the night, and he's delivered it for me. Tomorrow, if I run into an issue, I can rely on this guy to bail me out. Right. And the moment the customer starts seeing that, hey, you know what, you're not here to close the deal, right? You are here to give you the right solution for the problem you're facing or to resolve your issue. That is a massive step towards making the right champion. Now, how you identify the right champion is a whole new story altogether. Right? How do you identify the right champion is through a lot of digging, right? You have to consistently keep digging within the customer base, right? You have to keep talking to people. You have to keep testing them. So the best way to know if somebody is a champion is by testing him. So what is a champion? Champion is somebody who can influence something for you, who can make something happen for you, right? And who has the ability to deliver something on your behalf. So if I have to identify if that the person I think is my champion is the right champion, the first thing I ask him to do is, hey, can you get me a meeting with XYZ guy who's maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead of him? Right. Now, if he's somebody who's not respected in the system, he can never get me the meeting. Let's face it. Right. That means I built the wrong champion. Right. A champion has to be somebody who is respected within the system, because that is when people listen to him. Right. So again, you can spend 5 hours only on how to build the right champion. Right? So every step of Medic, or rather every word in Medic, right, you can double click into it for a couple of hours. Right. On there's nothing called the right process, but what is the most effective process to figure out a way to achieve each of those checkpoints within Medic, right?
Lovely. Okay, so till now we have seen your story, how you got into sales, what kind of attitude one person has to have, coachable, the ability to be in a position to unlearn and learn again and again, throughout your career, and what kind of psyche one person has. Then we kind of got into Medic and each of the term, and we got into champion finding. The problem identification part, we spent some time over there. Now, the next 10 minutes we are going to spend on GTM, right? Like go-to-market strategy. Because now this is new to you as well, in the sense, looking at your career, like you're doing GTM for the last 2-3 years. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Just about 5. Yeah.
For 5 years, great. Okay, so now, so in that experience, now from sales to GTM, and then what process do you follow for go to market? Like I give a product to you, and then let's say, hey Ashish, can you think of a GTM for us? How do you go about it?
So firstly, I need to figure out who my target market is, or what my target market is, right? Is it a luxury product? Is it a B2B product? Is it a B2C product? Is it a software product? Who are the relevant customers? Even if it is a product, for which domain does it belong to? Which vertical does it belong to? Is it a healthcare product? Is it a lifestyle product? Is it a manufacturing product? Is it software? It depends, right? On what your product is. And then we identify who the target audience for it is. Right? Now, these are again dependent on a lot of factors. If your product is a very high value product, you're spending a lot of time to ensure that the quality of the product is superior than what your competition has, and the capabilities and the features that your product has is far ahead of the curve in comparison to some of the other solutions, right? Because that is where firstly you identify the target market. Also, it helps you kind of give you some visibility into how you can price the product that you're going to sell, right? Because if you are targeting a product to, let's say, the highest level of segment within your target customer audience, somebody at the lower segment might not be able to even afford it, right? Even think of it. And then your marketing strategy entirely depends, or rather changes based on who your target audience is, right? And the platform that you use to communicate to those target audience also changes, right? So obviously there are 5, or rather the 7 key steps to get the right go-to-market strategy to begin with. First, you need to identify what your target market is, right? Then you have to identify who your target customers are, right? Then you need to know where you stand as a company or as a product in comparison to some of the competitions, right? So when it comes to, let's say, when it comes to cars, you have BMW, you have Honda, you also have Maruti, right? So you need to know where you fit in best. And how do you ensure that, let's say if you're fighting or if you're competing with the class of Mercedes, how do you ensure that you get visibility for your brand around the customers of Mercedes, right? Or people who are looking into Mercedes as one of their select products, right? How do you define your offer, right? What are the capabilities, features, whatnot that you're going to add to the product to appeal to that audience, right? Target audience. What are the different channels that you're going to take, right? Are you going to directly start selling? Are you going to use online platforms? Are you going to put a sales representative who's going to go and reach out to these customers personally? Are you going to set up a showroom? Or are you going to start a franchisee of sorts, right? Depending on what the product is and who your target customer is going to be, right? So there are a lot of factors that go into go-to-market strategy, but it begins with what your product is and what are you trying to do with it, right? And who your target customers are. Once you've identified at least the top 2 of these 2 things, the rest 5 will always follow. If you have the right person to support you with your strategy, it is definitely, I mean, I see no reason why you cannot get the right go-to-market strategy for the product or the service that you intend to sell. Right.
All right, awesome. It kind of covers the entire spectrum of the lean canvas, if you look at it that way, right? Like the product, your unique value proposition, which is understanding your product at a deeper level. Then you kind of look at your customers, and then you segment them, and you find the right channels to reach them, essentially, right? And pricing strategy is part of that as well. Okay, great.
Pricing and your marketing strategy, right?
Yes.
On how you intend to market the product as well, revolves around all of these factors.
Right. Achha, so just out of curiosity, this is because I'm going back into sales. How often have you gone back to the product team saying that, hey, can you make this small change because I'm not able to sell the current version of the product, or like, you know, and how does the product team usually react to that? Yeah.
So what happens is a lot of the features and capability that your product has is derived from what the customer wants.
Correct.
Right? Especially if you are an evolving company, if you are a startup, if you're growing, right? You hit these kind of roadblocks very frequently, because the customer knows that you are not a very large organization that will have to go through 1,000-page documentation even before it is approved. They know that you're going to be a Jugaadu company. You will do the Jugaad to make it work.
Yeah.
Right. And that is why they would look at a startup in the first place.
Exactly.
Because they would expect the startup to be agile, more effective, and more efficient.
Right.
With respect to at least capability building or feature building. Right. So this happens all the time. Right. When you engage a customer, there would be 10 things that your product does.
Right.
The customer is very happy with those 10 things. Right. But he's got another problem that needs another 4 things that your product should do. Right. And that is when he comes out to you and he says, hey, you know what? I love your product, but can you do this for me as well? And then the ball is in my court to take it or leave it. Right. Now, as a sales guy, there will be a lot of sales guys who will be adamant saying that no, it can't happen. Right. And then there will also be other sales guys that will go back and say, you know what, let me check with my team.
Correct.
Let me see if they can do it for us. And let me come back to you. And then you have the most aggressive kind of a sales guy who doesn't even understand the problem statement, but he'll say, you know what, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I can solve COVID for you. Don't worry. Just give me the deal. I'm going back and getting you a solution.
Yeah. Anything you want, sir. We'll get it done.
4 definitely happen, sir. Don't worry about it. 4 features.
So sign this, and then we'll make it happen.
Yeah. So it's the sales persona, right? To begin. Who are you? Sales guy, right? Are you a realistic sales guy? Are you an unrealistic sales guy? Or are you somebody who's cautious about these things, right? So it's just that.
Very nice. And okay, yeah, I mean that's good. Cool. Before we open it up to our community, okay, so for questions, do you think like I missed out on any questions that I should have asked you?
No, man. I think one question that I would have liked you if you would have asked is what are the top mistakes that sales guys do in meetings?
Okay. In meetings, you said.
Yeah, when you go out to a meeting, right? Because that is a make or break stage for you, right?
Right. Okay, so let's talk about that.
How badly can you mess it up?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is an important aspect, right? Because especially when you are in startups, and when you meet customers, you don't get a lot of opportunities to make it happen, right? You will be given one shot to sell your story, to sell your product, right? And if you don't get it right the first time, there is a very high probability that you will not get another shot to that. At least the same product, because you've lost your credibility, you've lost your faith. The customer is like, hey, you know what, just another guy doing his gig. And it's a no-brainer.
Right.
And this is something that I've learned the hard way too. And I think it's such a critical aspect of sales or even a conversation for that matter. Right? Whenever you get into a meeting, right, it doesn't matter if you're meeting somebody for the first time, second time, or whatever, right? I think as a startup entrepreneur or as a sales guy, the first thing you need to do is you need to know why you're getting into that meeting first, right? What are you going to discuss, right? And how many other people will be in the meeting? Who are those guys who are going to be participating in the meeting, right? What is their background, right? The idea is that you prepare for the meeting,
right?
Preparation is key, right? If I know that, hey, you know what, the purpose of this meeting is that they want to understand the product, they want to see what it's capable of doing, they want some background on my company, and at the end of the day, they might give me a shot on a deal that they might have, right? Once I know this, then the next step is to know who are the people who are going to be a part of the meeting. Because different people have different agendas, they have different priorities, right? They're looking for something which is relevant to them.
Correct.
Right? So in a meeting, if I have a procurement guy, if I have a quality guy, if I have somebody from operations and then somebody from sales, whatever I talk should be relevant to most of them in the table. Because if all of those people have the potential of being champions, and one of them says that, hey, you know what, he just wasted 2 hours of my time, you can never recoup from that. It's going to take you forever. Right. So, and I see a lot of, at least in the recent past, I've seen a lot of the new gen sales guys, right, who just passed out of college or who might have had 2-3 years of experience in sales, and they come out to meetings. They're absolutely, they don't know what's going to strike them because they think they've already got it covered. They think they're charming, they're charismatic, they know the product in and out, but that doesn't prepare you for what somebody else is going to throw at you. They just prepares you for what you know.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you get one shot, especially as startups and as entrepreneurs. You have to make the most of it. The only way you can make most of it is if you know what you're going to get into, right? And be as prepared as you possibly can for that possible meeting, right? You know who's in the room, what are the questions that you can expect. Let's say if it's a sales guy, you know what sort of a questions you can expect from him. If it's an operations guy, you know what sort of a questions that you can expect from him if you know your product really well. Right? And vice versa with somebody in quality or somebody in procurement, you know what these guys are going to ask you about your product specifically when you're going into that meeting. And you need to do some research on each of those guys, on the company, and then get into it.
Yeah.
It really helps setting the right expectation on the table. So yeah, I think there was one question you missed, but I'm glad I answered for you.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why we have that question, which is, did I miss any question? Right. Yeah. Great. Okay, cool. Thanks a lot, Ashish. Guys, Ajay, Shailesh, Suman, you guys have any questions? I know like we overshot by like 10 minutes. Give us 5 more minutes.
Yeah, sure. We'll all be chargeable, but
Okay. Let me see where are you guys. Yes. By the way, this week we wrote about spin. So we are following a flow, you know, like of spin and then.
Share that with me.
Yeah. Eventually, we'll get to Medic as well. And Shailesh and.
Did you say eventually we'll get to Medic?
Yeah. Eventually, we'll get to Medic.
Medic is the holy grail of sales.
Well, everyone says.
That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. People have their own ways, you know. Yeah.
I know that is because it is also because I've seen that some of the most successful sales guys in some of my previous organizations, they swear by Medic. And I know, and it is not the actual Medic. They've obviously made some improvisations to it.
Right.
It is. So if you look into it, every sales process is an improvisation of another sales process.
Correct, of course, yeah.
With some fine tweaking here and there to designed as per your comfort or to cover an angle that maybe another process was not. Right. But yeah, I've seen a lot of very, very successful sales folks swear by Medic. And again, this is entirely my opinion, that it's a remarkable tool to have when you're getting into an opportunity.
Right. I mean, yes. Okay. So accepted as a Medic.
Like I said, it's entirely my personal opinion. But yeah.
So the point is, any framework for that matter, even in consulting, we do this, right? So the only way you can stand out is by coming out with another new framework, and that guy is sales, right? Like he's selling new framework to you, right?
Yeah,
that's gonna keep happening.
Yeah. And like I said, if you look into it, as sales guys, right, we all do it. Just that we don't the process. We don't write it down, and then we put a tick around it once it's done. But any good sales guy, even if he does not know what Medic is, if he does not know what spin is, he does not know what value-based selling is, right? He will still be doing a lot of these things subconsciously without knowing that he's doing it. Just that the moment you call out the words like Medic and tell him what it is, and he's like, hey, you know what? I already do all of this, right? It's just making him aware that, hey, you're already doing it, just that you're documenting it.
Correct.
That is the only difference. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in documenting because so for me that becomes very important because then you can go back and see at what point it's faltering,
absolutely,
at
yeah.
what point it breaks.
And that is the whole point
Yes.
of following these frameworks,
Correct.
because it gives you the ability to reflect back
Yes.
upon what's being done, right?
Yeah.
What have you done? What have you missed? It gives you that tool to assess what part of the sales process are you doing well, or and what needs better work.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's most of the sales frameworks, right? If they're done, if you do it the right way, you'll more often than not be successful.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, there's a reason why people are following.
Yeah. There's a reason why companies spend millions of dollars to get this right, right? And I'm pretty sure it's working for them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
100%. All right. So one final question before we shut. So what would you tell to an aspiring salesperson who is just like coming out of college right now, given the current scenario, right? One, probably your joining date has been postponed because you're a 2020 pass out, the company isn't sure where the company itself is going. So what can a young aspiring sales professional coming out of the college should be doing right now?
Firstly, he should be learning. Right?
Learning?
Yeah, he should. I think he needs to have that growth mindset to begin with. Right? He has to understand that the only way he can be good at what he's doing is by consistently updating himself.
Right.
And upgrading himself.
Right.
From a knowledge perspective, from a skill perspective. Right? And learning may not necessarily mean read books. Right? You don't have to spend hours. I never read books. But what I instead do is I read a block for 15 minutes. Have 15 minutes. I might not have 3 hours for a book.
Right.
I probably go to YouTube. I have a set of people that I follow. I open some of their channels and I watch a couple of quick videos, 5 minutes videos, 10 minutes videos, right? But the idea is that you have to be updated with what's happening around the world, right? Depending upon the field of sales that you intend to choose. You have financial sales, you have pharmaceutical sales, you have software sales, blah, blah. It's endless, right? But you need to know, I mean, if you know that, hey, I want to get into this kind of sales, this is something that works for me, right? You have to do as much research as possible with respect to what customers are looking for from that particular domain. How are customers innovating so that you can scale up to the to customers' expectations and needs. If you have already gotten into a company, you need to start researching about the company, the product, the capability, the features that it has, right? And it just give you a good head start. Right. These things just give you, and sales is not easy. Anybody who says sales is easy has never sold before, right? He's just stumbled into being successful.
Yeah.
Any sales organization, or rather any sales process or organization, is a very high pressure job. We need to understand that we can make and break careers. If 50% of a sales organization in any company fails to deliver 1 year, a lot of heads are going to roll. And not just sales heads, right? You'll find people from all the different domains within the company, right? Marketing, operations, application development, back-end office. It impacts everybody. So the moment you decide to take up a sales role, you're not just liable to yourself, you're also liable to so many other people whom you don't even know exist. Right? And it's a very responsible job. You can't take it lightly. Right? And there will be good days, there will be bad days. But at the end of the day, if you're doing the right things, and if you're passionate about doing what you're doing, you will always be successful.
Awesome. On that lovely note, let's stop this. And if you want to keep learning, then join a club.
Absolutely, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ashish. This was really wonderful.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Personally learned a lot. We will